This is Weirdly Enough, your regular podcast for strange stories and amazing facts, delivered straight to your favorite podcast directory and at weirdlyenough.com. Now, here are your hosts, Andy and Len.
That's right, we're back again for another thrilling season. I think we're going to call it seasons rather than series. Series was the old... It was always what you said in the UK instead, but the Americans say season, don't they? Which, this is kind of a season, even though it's going to stretch.
I think for podcasting, I think the terminology is season. Now, admittedly, this is from a book I bought a while ago called Podcasting for Dummies.
Oh, yes.
Which was written by two American chaps. So, but I mean, season sounds about right, doesn't it?
Season, yeah.
Now, I had a look at it because I'm a bit sort of on the spectrum about stuff and a bit precise about stuff.
Yeah.
So my thing was, well, what's the perfect length for a season? But I was none the wiser. It could be minimum of 6, maximum of whatever.
To me, it's a year, but it's like a school year. So we're starting autumn, and we go right through to kind of early summer.
Yeah.
And that's what Series 4 is going to be. So this is going to be the 2022-23 season.
Well, we hope so. As long as Mr. V doesn't press the old... the old red button, because his finger's getting a little bit twitchy. Yes. A little bit twitchy. It's gone a little bit Mr. Strange, Dr. Strange glove, hasn't it, recently?
It has, yeah. Things are getting a bit worrying. But, well, if we're all still here, maybe even if they do press the button, our podcast will float out into the ether of space and be listened to millennia from now by ancient, or by races of intelligent aliens.
And if the bomb drops, baby, I'll be the last to know.
I'll be the last
to know. Etc.
To be honest, I don't want to be the last to know. I want to be the first to go. I would change that song if the bomb drops.
I would be like,
I want to be the first.
Is it Alex Cox? Is it Alex Cox? He's like the physicist or scientist. He was in D Room.
Brian Cox.
I know it was some sort of Cox, but
professor, not the sir. Or maybe he is a sir.
Professor Cox, but he always has this thing. Oh, we're all made of stars. We'll be made of stars if there's a 1 megaton airburst. We'll be at one with the universe. Then
let's not even go there.
Yeah.
So it's so good to be back. We're going to have lots of weird and exciting news and facts and different things over the next time. Have you had a good summer?
Well, it's not been bad, I mean, it's the usual sort of Northern Irish mugginess.
Yes.
To
be honest, we are doing this remotely. Usually we're in the same room, but I'm actually in my chateau in near Nice in France, and you're in your penthouse apartment just overlooking Times Square in Manhattan.
Can it be in like a little cottage beside a lake in the Highlands? Scotland, that'll be nicer.
Yes, if you want, but it's just, we've made so much money from podcasting that we've had to go our separate ways and only meet up virtually.
Apparently you can make money out of podcasting. It is possible, but I don't know.
Yeah. One guy I would listen to quite a bit is Adam Buxton. And he does all their things as well. Yeah. He's written a book, but he seems to kind of plod along in his podcast.
But you say to tell you the truth, I don't find people like that overly interesting, because he's a sort of a bit of a celebrity anyway.
Yeah.
Before he was a podcaster, but I'm intrigued by these kind of rising YouTubers that like 1 minute they're and they're TikTokers, but and they rise from obscurity and then they get their little plug from YouTube. And
do they?
They do. If you get like a certain, that's what we want to be aimed for, like a big plug from YouTube.
From YouTube, yes.
There's this weird Polish couple at the moment. Right? Do you ever see this thing on YouTube? It's like TikTok.
Yeah.
But it's not TikTok. There's like these little
stories
that they seem to be promoting. Yeah. It's like their kind of version of TikTok. There's this Polish couple, youngsters, and they seem to be like. They have this thing about like she acts like an NPC,
right?
And it's kind of funny. It kind of gets a bit samey after a while, but it's kind of like as though like it was real life sort of way. It's quite funny, like
One of the only things I've never been on TikTok, but one of the only things I laugh at is the guy. He's African. He's from a French-speaking country in Africa. I don't know where exactly he's from. I can't. is the Ivory Coast or somewhere. But he does these videos where he'll show like some stupid hack that people have put together. On YouTube, some stupid life hack, and then he shows the sensible way of doing it, and he does this kind of wee face, and he's very. But he earns like $750,000 a month doing that.
I don't know how much that Polish couple earn, but they're in something like 6 million subscribers. I couldn't believe it. It was like, what?
Yeah. So this week it's all about Aleister. Is that pronounced different to Aleister? Aleister Crowley.
You see, I think it's Aleister Crowley, but then some people think it's Aleister Crowley.
See, I pronounce it that Aleister because it's spelled Aleister. So it's different to Aleister, which is the kind of would be the one with the A in it, which is more Scottish to me.
Well,
Aleister is a bit.
The good news about this is to cut for any arguments. He's got several different names.
Okay.
He was called the Wickedest Man in the world, and also the Great Beast 666. So we could refer to him as the Beast.
I thought it was the Wickedest Man in England. It's actually the world.
The Wickedest Man in the world.
Oh right, he was promoted.
He was promoted, yeah. So
when did he live? It was it last century? Started last century?
He was born 12th of October 1875. And he died on the 1st of December 1947. He was a broken man.
A broken man? How so?
I suppose he lived quite a desolate life.
Yes.
His funeral was dubbed the Black Mass, and it took place 4 days later and was only attended by a dozen mourners.
Right.
So it was a bit of an obscure end. I got a couple of good quotes actually. One from a guy called Mark Delbin. Who's a DJ and sort of researcher, and the influence of sort of the occult and stuff in popular culture.
Okay.
And he's got a good quote here where he says, "In so many ways, Crowley was the original rock star, with ritual sex, magic, and mind-altering drugs ever present in his life story. Crowley's influence on their associations with the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Jimmy Page, and Jay-Z are well documented."
Right.
And there's another wee quote here from Ozzy. I can't do the accent.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Yes, Ozzy Osbourne himself. He says, "He was a very weird guy, and I always wanted to write a song about him. While we were recording the Blizzard of Oz album, there was a pack of tarot cards he had designed lying around the studio. Well, one thing led to another, and Mr. Crowley was born," which was his sort of tribute to Crowley.
Right, okay.
Now, I'll just have a quick biographical rundown. You see, the topic of Crowley is so big. You could do a whole season on it.
Yeah, okay.
You really could.
Do that.
You really could actually do a whole season on it because there's so much to talk about. So we're just going to focus on maybe the quick bio and then just a rundown of some of his influence in popular culture. But again, you could probably do a series on that.
Certainly, yeah.
Because it's just such a vast arena.
Yeah, okay.
Now, Crowley's parents were members of the Plymouth Brethren, very strict. His mother, Emily, had a very difficult relationship with her son.
Oh, how so?
Because basically she was very strict Plymouth Brethren, and he was a great disappointment from an early age, in that he was consorting with prostitutes when he was at public school and stuff like that,
right?
Which he shouldn't have been doing. So he was quite a rebel from an early age.
I've heard mention of something called the Order of the Golden Dawn. What's that?
Yeah, it was an early esoteric kind of occult order that he was involved in.
All right.
And
did he form it, or it was something that?
It was already existed. Now there was a lot of prominent members. I mean, one of the other ones was it was your man, the Irish author, William Butler Yeats.
Oh,
he was in the Order of Golden Dawn. Now his mother Emily coined the name the Beast.
Oh right, okay.
And it actually stuck with him because people began to call him the Beast from his school days. So it was like probably his artist kind of nickname that kind of stuck with him. So he was known as the Beast.
And before that, was the name the Beast associated in any way to like Satanism or anything like that, or did his mother kind of invent that word?
No, well, I mean, I suppose like Satan's always been called like the Beast, but I think it was like he was. I don't know if it was because he was satanic at that age, or it was just maybe because he was beastly. You know, the Beast, you're the Beast, you're the Beast.
But perhaps a lot of what Aleister Crowley became then was from a very strict upbringing.
Yeah,
rebelling against it and just saying, well, I'm just going to go the other way.
You get people like that, and they live very extreme lives, and they have to be extreme. Like, it could be that if he was in a very desolate family, he might have gone the other way and become very, moral or very, very, very religious. But anyway, the Order of the Golden Dawn, he was initiated into this order on the 18th of November 1898 by a chum of his called MacGregor Maffers. I can hardly say it name. It's one of those funny. Second name was the first name. He was the group's leader. And the ceremony actually took place in Mark Mason's Hall, a Freemasonic hall in London. And during the ceremony, Crowley took the magical name, which is Frater Perdubo. So within the order, he's known as Frater Perdubo.
Was the order connected to the Masons anyway?
I don't think so, but it could be that some individual members may have been Masons, hence the link, Now again, it's
they just kind of ran it as a bit of a function room. They could have done it in a hotel.
They could have done it. I mean, I wonder did they do it undercover now?
Ah, right, okay.
But Crowley is said to have channeled a series of instructions and principles from a guardian angel, and he called this guardian angel Aiwas, and this was in 1984.
Right.
Sorry, 1904. Sorry,
yeah.
1904, and these formed what he called the Book of the Law, and this became the central basis for his own system of beliefs, which is called Philema, and that's the Greek word for will. And Crowley described what he called the art of magic, which is Magick. And this was his preferred spelling. Now, there's a place that he's associated with that is sort of a great significance to the popular culture angle, and that's Belaskin House, which is a cottage on the shores of Loch Ness. And between 1900 and 1904, him and his acolytes did rituals there of an occult nature. Now, he bought Belaskin in November 1899, and he actually styled himself as the Laird of Belaskin, which is nonsense. I mean, he just gave himself that title. But he took to wearing traditional Highland dress whenever he went down to London.
Any landowner in Scotland is called a laird. So
I suppose,
it's not really like a hereditary title or like a peerage title.
I didn't know that. It's not true, so it's not necessary. So if you
own land in Scotland,
you could call yourself laird. That's legitimate, yeah. Now, Belaskin is an unusual place, and it's said to have been situated where it was due to the lack of direct sunlight that hits that particular side of Loch Ness, so that's why he was so interested in them, because it's pretty kind of dark, sinister kind of place,
I imagine there's a lot of trouble with moss.
Do you remember Max Spears?
Yeah, we covered Max Spears a while back. Well, he predicted different things, didn't he?
Yeah, and he had a very kind of mysterious death, as you recall.
Yes, okay.
Now, we covered that in episode 20, season 3 of the podcast. Now, he gave an interview shortly before he died with a Northern Irish UFO researcher called Miles Johnston. No relation of mine. I think he's from Lurgan or somewhere like that, where he described one of these rituals, and he says Crowley opened the door to another dimension of Belaskin House. He was trying to summon Baal, his demon, who I think might be mentioned in the Bible, I'm not too sure, in a 6-month long ritual. So these rituals,
he's committed to it anyway.
They weren't like an hour or so. It was like literally 6 months long. I mean, presumably they take breaks for to eat and sleep and stuff, but it was an ongoing thing for 6 months. So it's pretty hardcore. But anyway, he collapsed a broken man at the end of it and couldn't finish it, and just left the house. So he just abandoned it. It was just too much for him. So he went back to London and had a big fight with MacGregor Maffis, and they were the two leaders of the Golden Dawn at the time. They had a massive feud for 2 or 3 years, and Maffis was left a broken man too. So yes, it's all very strange. And interestingly enough, this is about the time where sightings of the Loch Ness Monster started.
They found a surgeon's photograph.
It was about this time. And because it was, I mean, there have been reports of the Loch Ness Monster sort of going back to medieval times or the Dark Ages. But it had gone quiet for a long time, and then there's a sudden upsurge.
So maybe it's Baal himself
could have summoned it,
when they talk about the surgeon's photograph.
Yeah.
That famous first photograph of the Loch Ness Monster. Yeah. He was actually a gynecologist.
Right, didn't know that.
But they didn't want to say that back then because they thought that was a bit rude. To talk about things like that, so they called him a surgeon. It
was 1920, wasn't it? The surgeon's photograph, Now, he was a mountaineer as well, but I believe you'll go into that later on.
Yeah, I was looking at that this morning, and I've poked out a few details of that I find really interesting. We'll have a look at that. In fact, do you want to go and look at that now, or do you want to do that at the end?
Probably fit in more now, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's more biographical, so...
It turns out he was dead keen on mountaineering. Some accounts state that he first was introduced to the sport at boarding school by Joseph Lister. That's the antiseptic guy.
Oh, right.
Joseph
right,
Lister.
Yeah.
Crowley befriended the son of a well-known Jewish socialist, Oscar Eckenstein, a chemist turned railway engineer, and they jointly led an expedition to summit K2 in 1902, and again attempted to climb the third highest peak in the world. And I'm sorry to any Nepalese listening if I don't get this right, Changchunga, which until the middle of the 19th century is believed to be the biggest mountain in the world. Both attempts were unsuccessful, but the route chosen by them for Changchunga was used by the successful climbers in the expedition in 1955. And K2 finally being successfully ascended in July 54. The reports say that following a storm, Crowley had an argument with fellow climber Guy Knowles after Knowles decided not to climb higher on K2. During the encounter, Crowley pointed a revolver at Knowles, but was apparently kicked in the nether regions before he could fire off a shot. And after that, the attempt was abandoned. During the Changchunga attempt, 4 of Crowley's team died in an avalanche. Crowley had warned the men not to attempt the descent during the night, and allegedly he didn't bother to get out of his sleeping bag when he heard the screams of the survivors. And this is something I've heard talked about a lot, that he just lay there and said, oh well, I don't care. And when he came back, he was very dismissive of these guys. He said, I'm number one. He should really have been hosting Top Gear.
Yeah.
That would have been where
he sounds quite Jeremy Clarkson-esque.
Yeah. No offense, Clarkson. Accounts of both attempts tell of the brutality shown by Crowley towards the barefoot porters, with some accounts stating that he flogged them. It's worth pointing out that he was revered as a great mountaineer by his contemporaries and successors alike. He made a number of improbable and dangerous ascents of the chalk cliffs at Beachy Head. So the big white cliffs of Dover that they talk about. Or is that the same as Beachy Head? Maybe it's different. No, sorry, maybe it is. Somebody can write in about that. He didn't use any form of protection, any climbing gear. He didn't use any axes or anything like that. And it's been suggested he was able to do this because he had a high tolerance to risk. He just didn't care, basically. It wasn't until 90 years later that the Cullen Crack on Beachy Head was again ascended, and this time it was by Mick Fowler, a friend, and he had the aid of modern safety gear, so he only did it. He only did it with all the right gear. Crowley was outraged, as Fowler said. He was obviously good, something of a star rock climber. In fact, he was light years ahead of his time in his attitude to tackling vertical chalk cliffs. The ground he covered was without doubt amongst the most technically difficult in Britain, but his achievements were never really appreciated in his lifetime.
It's a different side to Crowley, but one thing that emerges in all this is he definitely is somebody that would go for the extremes.
Yes.
The extremes of experience. Now, another kind of interesting little episode was in the late 1900s, as his inheritance began to run out, he was hired by the Earl of Tankerville to help protect him from witchcraft. Now, Crowley soon recognised that the Earl's paranoia, it was mainly because he was addicted to cocaine by that stage. So he was obsessed with witches, basically. And so Crowley took him on holiday to France to recuperate. Right. So apparently that sorted them out,
no cocaine, but plenty of nice wine and cheese.
Indeed. Now, have you ever heard of LAM? LAM?
Did we talk about LAM before?
I think we did.
Drawing or something.
Yeah, yes. It's a drawing that's referred to as LAM, LAM, and it's thought to be a drawing of an entity that Crowley contacted in 1918. And a lot of people have pointed out that it has a great resemblance to the images of grey aliens.
Oh, right.
Which have appeared to many since the 60s.
That must be why we talked about it then, yeah.
Yeah, so if you Google it, it's very, it's very legal. But now, I know this is a family-friendly podcast, but gets a little bit spicy in this section, but we'll, you know,
tread carefully.
Tread carefully, right? In June 1920, Crowley published Leia Sublime. I think it's Leia Sublime, which is a 666 word poem, which describes the beast's adventures with Leia Herzog, who was a high school teacher from New York who had come to Europe to be one of Crowley's Scarlet Women. Because he was already becoming a bit of a rock star, or a proto rock star by the side, so he obviously had his groupies. The ode His Mistress was described by a critic as, quote, the most disgusting piece of erotica in the English language.
Right,
which is an achievement, yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of people googling that one.
Yeah, so it's the most disgusting piece of erotica.
Have you read it?
No, I'm going to Google it. It sounds quite spicy.
Google it.
In the 1920s, Crowley established the Abbey of Thelema in a Sicilian farmhouse where he practiced ritual and sex magic. Until Mussolini kicked him out.
Yeah, Mussolini didn't like him
because he wasn't impressed at all. And because the locals weren't too impressed, so they complained to Mussolini, and he was like, "No, get out." And this series of events led to a patriotic magazine called John Bull
in Italy,
which is a British magazine, John Bull, which labelled Crowley as the wickedest man in Britain. So presumably that was before he was the wickedest man in the world. And it also said he was a man we'd like to hang. So they didn't hang back there.
But they should do that in modern newspapers now.
A man we'd like to hang.
A column at the back.
String him up.
A man we'd like to hang.
You can imagine some colonel over the breakfast table, red faced. So a man we'd like to hang.
He was kind of the first modern celebrity, really, wasn't he?
Certainly, he was the rock star before there was a rock star. In July 1920, Jane Wilfe, who was a silent film actress, arrived at the Abbey. She'd exchanged intense letters with him for quite a while. And Jane was unaware, however, that he was doing one of his rituals that went on for months. And this one was called The Mystery of Filth, which basically meant he didn't wash and was filthy and didn't, groom himself.
Yes.
Because to gain wisdom of some kind. And when she arrived at the Abbey, she was quite horrified by what was going on and Crowley's unkempt looks. So that was the mystery of filth. But anyway, there's lots more you could say in a biographical terms, but we'll go on to pop culture here. Now, Crowley actually worked for naval intelligence during World War II, and he met at the time Ian Fleming, who became quite good friends with him. And they reckon Fleming actually based one of his characters, Le Chiffre, I think it is, from Casino Royale, was based on Crowley. And Crowley claimed to have invented the V for Victory, two-fingered salute that Churchill used to do. Because it was supposed to be a magical way of kind of repelling the Hitler salute. So you did, whenever they did that, the two-finger salute, that would kind of repel it, kind of magically, and then we go on to the post-war period where there's a wealth of stuff. For example, in the 1970s, John Lennon gave an interview for Playboy magazine where he was talking about Crowley's teaching. And again, another quote, he said, "The whole Beatle idea was to do what you want, do what thou willst, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody," which is always a quote that Crowley used from his Thelema, do what thou wilt. So it's a direct quote. In 1967, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band features the Beast in the top left row between an Indian guru and Mae West. So he's one of the many characters if you look at the cover of Sgt. Pepper. Now Mick Jagger was obsessed with Crowley as well. In 1969, Jagger played Moog synthesizer on the soundtrack of an experimental film called Invocation of My Diamond Brother. And this was directed by a filmmaker and Satanist called Kenneth Anger. And it was based on Crowley's 1929 novel, because he's a novelist as well, called Moonchild. And the film features an appearance by none other than the Anton LaVey, who was the founder of the Church of Satan. Like I said, another motto from what he called the Book of the Law is "Every man and woman is a star," which is a phrase I've heard in a few things.
Yeah.
There's I don't know if it was Ian Brown maybe had a song. I remember that was one of the lyrics of it. And this was referenced by John Lennon in his 1970 hit Instant Karma. And the lyric goes, "Instant karma is gonna get you. Who in the hell do you think you are? A superstar? Well, right you are. Will we all shine on like the moon, the stars and the sun?" David Bowie had a big interest in Crowley. I believe you maybe have a little...
Yeah. We'll be talking about David Bowie later on.
Oh, right, yeah.
In the podcast, yeah.
See, you'll find as time goes on for the season, all these kind of guys kind of link up in many different ways, you know.
Very much so.
Now, David Bowie, he had a big interest in Crowley, and in 1971, he released a track called Quicksand. And the quote is, "I'm closer to the golden dawn, immersed in Crowley's uniform. I'm not a prophet or a Stone Age man, just a mortal with the potential of a Superman." And there's the infamous Victoria Station incident.
What happened at Victoria Station?
Now, this happened in 1976, and to provide a bit of context...
Was that when Bowie did the Hitler salute?
What appeared to be, that's what people took it to be.
Yeah.
And it was about the time of, when he had the thin white Duke character, and he was making lots of references to Hitler and to fascism, and he used to say things like, "Oh, Britain could do with a fascist leader," and all this. But I mean, it's hard to say how much of that was the character, or just maybe the too many drugs. But Bowie caused a storm of controversy in the press in 1976 when he was returning to London from touring, and he was snapped by the paparazzi, giving the stiff right arm salute. And this was regarded as a Nazi salute, and this was at a time when there was a bit of a revival of sort of neo-fascism in Europe. But it's actually thought by students of the occult that he was actually making the sign of the Zelator, which is what they call a grade sign within the Order of the Golden Dawn. So it's not a Nazi salute, it's a kind of Crowley kind of thing, Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
I've always had an enduring interest in Crowley.
Didn't one of them own the house for a while?
Yes, it was Jimmy Page.
Oh, that's nice.
Now, in 1978, Page gave an interview of Sounds magazine where he said, "I feel Aleister Crowley is a misunderstood genius of the 20th century." Now, Page was big into all things esoteric and occult because he actually owned a bookshop in Kensington called the Equinox Booksellers and Publishers. Now, he owned Blaskin House from 1971 to 1991, 20 years. But in all those years, he only stayed a few nights at the cottage. Led Zeppelin 3 was released in 1970, and it features a Crowley quote in the vinyl groove of the LP. And apparently during the recording of the album, the band conducted occult rituals at Blaskin. So I don't know. I mean, he only stayed a few nights, so presumably they did the rituals and then they stayed somewhere else. And this is a new thing, because I knew about the Led Zeppelin thing, but Blaskin's actually referenced by the Police.
Okay, right.
Which was quite surprising, because you don't really associate Sting and the Police with this kind of stuff. 1983 single by the Police, Synchronicity 2, where Sting sings, "Many miles away, there's a shadow on the door of a cottage on the shore of a dark Scottish lake."
I think I know that, yes. Yeah, I know. I like about the Police, actually. Sting kind of went a bit off the boil, but I do like early Police stuff.
Yeah, but it's a weird thing, because you don't think of the Police has been and that sort of stuff, The last owners of Blaskin were a Dutch family, and around Christmas 2015, the cottage burnt to the ground in mysterious circumstances. And in 2019, there was rumours that were spreading around occult circles in the UK that the Ordo Templi Orientalis, the OTO, which is an occult order based upon Crowley's ideas, they were planning to purchase the house and restore it as a cult compound and a base for dark rituals.
Yes.
And as of recording, this is October 2022, the cottage is owned by the Blaskin House Foundation, who describe themselves on their website, blaskinhouse.org, as a registered Scottish charity. And I've had a quick look, and they seem to be fairly non-sinister and sort of wholesome. So, and they have a mission statement to restore the Blaskin House estates and to educate the general public about Scottish history. So yes, see, and it goes on. Ozzy Osbourne had a thing about Crowley. In 1980, he gave an interview with Circus Magazine, and he said that he thought that Crowley was a phenomenon of his time. And I didn't know this, but Ozzy actually had a track called Mr. Crowley on his 1980 album Blizzard of Oz, which I've never even heard of, but he's less than complimentary, because there's a quote here which says, "Did you talk to the dead? Your lifestyle to me seems so tragic." It's a bit rough, like, but rude, like, Red Hot Chili Peppers, 1991, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic was the name of their LP, which obviously references Crowley's Sex Magic, and which the Beast had first written about in 1914 in his book Liber Ape. And we get on say what I mean. This is a wealth of information. This could go on forever, but we'll try and wind it up soon. But in the 21st century, there's a very interesting thing here I came across. 2008, an obscure low-budget British horror film called Chemical Wedding. And the screenplay was actually written by Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. He's another heavy metal rock guy that's obsessed with Crowley. And basically Simon Cowley is a 21st century Cambridge professor. He has a mishap with a virtual reality machine, which leads to him being possessed by the spirit of Crowley. And then the Beast uses the mild-mannered academic as a sort of skin suit, and he wanders about 21st century England, setting up a New York occult organisation and seeking a new Scarlet Bride. And Jay-Z, this is where it gets kind of weird. 2010s, the rock sign was popularised by Jay-Z, and apparently this is done by creating a pyramid shape by placing the thumbs and first fingers of each hand together. When held in front of the face, this forms the all-seeing eye symbol. And apparently this is one of the grade signs of the OTO, which was an occult order that Crowley headed for a while. And apparently this is where it gets weird and deep and stuff I didn't know. You know Stuart Sutcliffe, who was an early member of the Beatles? In the early 1960s. There's a photograph apparently of him making the rock sign in 1962. Which is weird.
What's that pyramid thing?
The pyramid thing, and 2014, do you remember Peaches, who's Bob Geldof's daughter? Who tragically died. Shortly before her death, she became increasingly fascinated by the occult, and particularly the OTO, and she was actually pictured with the letters OTO, big letters OTO, on her tattooed on her arm. So the legacy of the Beast continues on.
Very strange.
And I believe you've got an interesting bit about Bowie.
We'll come to that. We're going to take a short break and come to that. That's going to be our weird short for this week. I just, with the new Moonage Daydream film coming out, or out at the minute, I thought I'd like to explore this one. But thanks very much for telling us all about Aleister Crowley. We'll be back next week talking about predictive programming.
Interesting,
Interesting. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for that thing about Bowie. So in the theatres now, as they say, in the cinemas now, this new film about David Bowie, Moonage Daydream. I don't know much about it. It seems to be maybe not a documentary so much as just a lot of collections of live recordings and all put together in this kind of psychedelic. It looks absolutely phenomenal. Mark Commode every week he rates the top 5 movies, and I think he rated Moonage Daydream as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Of his top 5 for this week. It looks really good. I haven't had a chance to get the cinema to see it yet, but it got me thinking about an old conspiracy that I'd heard about David Bowie supposedly predicting Kanye West.
This is a weird thing that I've never heard of.
The music industry is full of strange conspiracies. In the past, we've looked at the 27 Club. You can go and look at that old podcast if you want. That famous club where members all died at the age of 27. And soon we're going to be dedicating a podcast to the theories that Paul McCartney is dead. The Paul is dead conspiracy. David Bowie is a very interesting individual. He would construct characters like the famous Ziggy Stardust and attract many different conspiracies about what some of his cryptic lyrics mean. And this is probably a good time to talk about the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders of Mars. Not only does the album celebrate its half century this year, but the critically acclaimed movie Moonage Daydream has been released, as I said. The conspiracy that I'm really interested in with David Bowie actually surrounds a theory that he predicted the life of American rap star Kanye West, and pays mention to Kanye throughout his career, including in the final Black Star album. West, like Bowie, isn't one to shy away from controversy. What are some of the things he's done? Strange names, for example, like his kid. So he's got North West, Chicago West, Sam West, as in like a biblical Sam, and Saint West. He supported Trump when the whole media world turned their backs on him, and he's outspoken about his Christian faith, even going so far as to release a Christian rap record, Jesus is King, in 2019. Back in 2013, Kanye West appointed himself Yeezus, Yeezus. So he wasn't afraid to court controversy, and perhaps he himself believes he got into some sort of divine direction. The conspiracy goes back to the cover of Bowie's fifth studio album from 1972, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, which launched Bowie's alter ego character Ziggy Stardust. Bowie is seen in the album cover in a dark London street beneath a sign for a shop called K West. It's the only thing of any prominence in the picture apart from Bowie. And if you look at the picture, it just shows Bowie really. There's a lot of boxes and things around the street, but it's all quite dark.
It's very iconic this album cover.
The first track on Ziggy Stardust is 5 years, a prediction of a dire world that would happen in 5 years' time if a so-called Starman didn't come back to Earth to save humanity. The strange thing is that exactly 5 years and 2 days after the album was released, Kanye West was born. Spooky, eh? Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just kind of something that happened. But in the 1974 interview with Rolling Stones magazine, David Bowie made an odd prediction about the death of Ziggy Stardust. As soon as Ziggy dies on stage, the infinite takes his elements and makes themselves visible. Strangely, West was one of the first celebrities to tweet after the passing of Bowie in 2016, saying David Bowie was one of the most important inspirations. So fearless, so creative, he gave us magic for a lifetime. It's a bit tenuous, but these connections don't stop the theories bubbling away. Another coincidence is that 3 days before Bowie died, the singer Sia previewed a new song called Reaper, which was co-written and produced by none other than, you guessed it, yes, Kanye West. Funnily enough, I had Spotify on shuffle today, and Reaper, I've never heard Reaper before, and it came up, and I thought, oh, that's that song. Strange. Another coincidence is that 3 days before Bowie died, we've done that. David Bowie's final album, Black Star, the title track is a strange, mournful sounding piece that some compare to a black mass. Went back to Aleister Crowley again. Around halfway through the song, the tempo changes and the song becomes more upbeat. The lyrics are: something happened on the day he died. Spirit rose a meter and stepped aside. Someone else took his place and bravely cried, I'm a black star, I'm a black star. And many say, of course, West is literally a black star. The third track on the album, Lazarus, has biblical tie-ins, which also connect to West's reference to God and Christ. It's a bit of a stretch, really. I'm not one who really believes in all this, but it's fun to have a little listen back to old Bowie albums. And a bit of Kanye West was good to listen to as well. I'm really looking forward to that film, Moonage Daydream. But it's interesting to see how all these conspiracies work.
Do you know what I'm just thinking of? Do you ever see these conspiracy knobs?
Yeah.
And it's got, like, some of them are absolutely crazy, and it's like all these little things that like connect up to each other, and it's all like fantastically complicated sometimes. that's you know, because you kind of think, well, David Bowie connects to Crowley, but it also connects to our next episode, which is going to be about predictive programming, because there's an example of predictive programming.
What is?
what you just talked about.
Okay.
About the whole Kanye West thing. And David Bowie.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much for joining us this week. We'll be back again next week. Of course, it's about predictive programming next week. I've really enjoyed coming back. We are back hopefully every week now. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. You can ask your Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play Weirdly Enough podcast, and it'll come up. Look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and other socials as well. We're all over the place. Just search Weirdly Enough and you will come across us. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe wherever you're listening to us, and like us, leave us a comment. It really does help, and we really appreciate that. Thank you, and talk again soon.
Thanks for listening to Weirdly Enough. Remember to subscribe to get the latest edition as soon as it drops. And don't forget to leave a review. Email us about anything we've discussed or with your own weird tale at podcast@weirdlyenough.com.